This is Ask Joe number 175. Hey there, this is Joe Gilder. Welcome to Ask Joe, also known as the Home Studio Corner podcast, and special thanks to my boy Snoopy. If you're listening to the audio version, you can't see Snoopy, but he was on sale, and he makes these sounds when you open his mouth. And you can't not laugh and listen to Snoopy. So anyway, Snoopy will probably be making many appearances on future episodes. Maybe he'll be the sound of, if you ask a dumb question, Snoopy will jump in. I don't know. Maybe not. That might be a little mean, but who doesn't love Snoopy? Okay, so today you may be here because I sent you an email or you saw a post on Facebook or you're curious about this idea of me getting fired. And, you know, people love a good scandal story, so I'm going to share it with you. And because I think it's important. I think this is the side of doing audio work that probably doesn't get talked about as much as it should. And if you are thinking about doing client work, this is probably something that you are honestly afraid of and worried about. And maybe this is one of the things that holds you back from really jumping in and really going for it. So while this isn't a business podcast, obviously, and my goal is to help you make better music, for a good percentage of you, the idea of making better music is tied into the idea of helping other people make better music. So whether you're getting paid to help people or you're just helping them for free, you still want to do good work. And there's always the option that it's just not going to work, okay? And that you just might not be a good fit. I liken it to dating. A lot of people, and maybe it's not as many people as I think, but when I was dating, and I only dated a handful of girls before I met Pam, so it's not like I had dozens of girlfriends or anything. But pretty quickly, early on, I realized, especially once I thought, I was in college, I'm thinking I would love a wife. I started thinking dating is really just a, are you the right one or not situation. So I only had a handful of girlfriends in college, or really just one, plus Pam. And the first one, it was pretty clear you're not going to be my wife. So the answer to the dating question, are we going to get married, was no. And so the relationship ended. Now, was it a bad thing? No. I mean, was it painful? Sure, all that stuff. But it wasn't the end of the world because we answered the question. The whole point of dating was to answer, are we a good fit to date forever? And if the answer is no, better to find out sooner than later. So what does that have to do with mixing? Well, take a sip from my squirrel mug that says, nuts about you. Anyway, well, what does this have to do with me and with audio? So I got hired to mix an album. It was a 12 or 13 song album by a couple of guys. And I didn't know them prior. They knew me through Home Studio Corner. I ran a special a few weeks ago where if you bought my speed mixing course, there was a deluxe version where in addition to the videos, I would mix a song for you and actually do a video of me mixing the song. So you'd get a mix. You'd hire me to mix and also get a video, and the price was ridiculously low because I just wanted to see what would happen and if it was interesting for people. And it was, and several people took me up on it. And this one group of guys that had a band were just finishing up a big album, and they asked if I would mix it for them. And of course I agreed, and we got lined up, and we did a 50% down payment on the full 12 or 13 songs, and I booked up my schedule and said, send me songs. And so they did. They started sending one or two at a time and was slowly working through the project. And we got through about 6 songs, and they came to me in an email and said, hey, we've decided we're going to go in a different direction. We the tones and the way you're mixing the song doesn't quite fit with our vision. We really want it to sound like X and Y artist. And even though I know it's different instrumentation, your mixes don't sound like those artists, and that's really what we want. So we're going to go with someone locally. We also feel like only having up to 2 revisions really limits us on what we're able to accomplish with you. So that second part is interesting. Early on, I realized that if I'm going to do client work for people, I've got to put some limits in place on how many revisions they get. So if you don't put that in place, you'll have someone who says you'll be on mix 52 and there'll be no end in sight, and you will have put in 40 hours into a mix when you really should have only put in 4 or something. So I've made it a point for several reasons to say, and if you contact me today to mix something, when I send you the quote, it'll say on there, this includes up to 2 revisions. So 3 versions of the mix. You get mix 1, you can make revision requests. Then you listen to the mix 2, and then you can make requests again. I send you a final mix 3 for approval. And you can say, no, I liked mix 2, or you can say, that's great, let's go. Now, is that taking advantage? No, I don't think so. I think it's just a way of, if they know they only have so many revisions, it helps them focus. It also helps me know that I shouldn't throw in a crappy mix 1 and then hope to make up for it on mix 2. That's just not good business, right? So for whatever reason, between the fact that they wanted maybe a little bit more control, a little bit more involvement in the mixing process, they were on the other side of the country and couldn't come sit in the studio with me while I was mixing, and combined with the facts that some of the creative decisions that I made in the mix they weren't happy with, combine those together, and it ended up answering the question of, should we date? The answer was no. Now, there's a couple things I should say. First of all, does it sting to get fired? Yeah, absolutely. It does. Someone's essentially telling you your work is not good enough. Or they're not saying that, but that's what you hear, is you are not good enough. So yes, it stings. But also, were there other things at play that may have attributed to them not wanting to continue working with me? And I will say, probably. I originally gave them a deadline, and I had a few weeks to get to this deadline, and I dragged my feet, and I had some things happen, and I put off a few sessions, and ultimately I didn't turn in as many songs as I said I was going to turn in. And I have to imagine that left a sour taste in their mouth. I dropped the ball. I was not a good contractor. I did not keep my end of the deal as precisely as I said I would. And that sucks. That's not a good thing to do, and that would have been enough for them to say, hey, this isn't going to work out. Combine that with the mixes that I sent to them, they felt like weren't moving in the right direction that they wanted, and they felt like they wouldn't get it in that direction with the 2 revisions or the 3 revisions that they get. Combine all those together, and they said it wasn't a good fit. So here's what I want to tell you. Getting fired is the easy part. How you respond to it is the hard part. So does this happen a lot with me? No, it doesn't happen that often, which is why I wanted to talk about it with you. Am I worried this will hurt my reputation? Maybe a little bit. But honestly, I'm more concerned with finding some good out of it. And if you can learn from my mistake, to me, that's a win too. So does it hurt to get fired? Absolutely. But you have to keep in mind, they're not telling you you're awful. They're telling you that you just aren't a good fit. It's just like dating. If you and the girl decide not to get married, or you and the boy decide you're not going to become husband and wife, that doesn't necessarily mean that you and or the boy are bad or awful or horrible people. That doesn't happen. Now, it could be the case, but more often than not, it's just that you're not compatible. Let's say you're in a band and you want to hire a new lead guitar player, and your band plays very acoustic stuff with a little bit of electric guitar, and somebody comes in and all he plays are Metallica riffs, and he's rocking, a full stack Marshall's amps, and he's playing everything at super high gain. Well, guess what? He's not going to be a good fit. Now, hopefully you discover that before inviting him into the band, but let's say you hired him for the band on a whim because he was really good, and then you realize he's just not a good fit. It makes sense that he no longer be in the band, and it's best for everyone. So here's how I responded to this. First of all, I took a minute to think, okay, let me just tell you how I responded, and that should shed some light on what I think is important in a situation like this. So I responded immediately. I didn't sulk. I didn't sit around and be angry at them. I just composed an email back. And I said essentially this: hey, I really appreciate you being so honest with me. It must be really hard for you to write that email telling me that you want to move in a different direction. Because that's true, right? Could you imagine if, their position, they know me through Home Studio Corner, I'm the quote teacher, and they're telling me they don't like my work. That's an awkward spot for them to be in. And I was really thankful that they said, hey, you know what? It's just not working. and we'd like to move in a different direction, and we'd rather tell you now than later. So that's what I told him. I said, would much rather, when you decide this isn't going to work, that you tell me right away than allow me to just keep mixing your songs and them not go in the right direction. Or if you pay me to mix the entire album and then you go have someone else mix it because you didn't like my mixes, but you didn't have the heart to tell me, and you paid me for mixing a full album when you didn't want anything. So I told him that stuff. I said, thank you for being honest. It's painful. It sucks. I really liked your music, which I really did. I was really enjoying the music. And I wish this had worked out, but it didn't. And I said, and that one of the things they did that was very generous, they offered to pay me for the mixes that I had done, and then just ask for a refund for the difference, which I thought was very generous. Had they wanted a full refund, I would have said, okay. I would rather do right by the customer than save a few bucks or keep a few bucks. And the final thing I told him was, when the album is finished, let me know so I can buy a copy, because I really do want a copy of this album. Now, am I telling you this to pat myself on the shoulder? No, I'm not. I'm not some super saint. I'm just, to me, I was surprised at how well I handled it. If that makes sense. And I think we all have something to learn from it. I could have gone in the direction of, these guys are idiots. They don't know what they're talking about. Their music's never going to sound like this other artist because it's a completely different genre and completely different instrumentation. I did the best. They're not going to get better mixes than what I gave them. I could have gone that route. And you can go, if you're into like reading business books or business podcasts and stuff, it wouldn't take you long to find a character like that who has massive bravado, and when anyone shoots them down, they go and shoot them down to make themselves feel even better. So if they fired me, then I go bash their music. Maybe not to their face, but maybe I come tell you on the podcast, man, their music sucked. It didn't suck. It was really good. But I make all this stuff up to make myself feel better about the fact that they chose to go a different direction. It's just not worth it. Just like, as you can imagine, running a website like Home Studio Corner, I get some haters from time to time, people who send me really hateful, hurtful emails or comments or things like that. And there have been times where I've gotten those and I've fired back. I've said, how dare you, for all the free content that I create, for you to be like, and I just go back. And guess what? They never come back and say, you know what, Joe, you're right. I apologize for my tone. I was out of line. No, they just get revved up and they come back more, and you feel worse and worse, and you find you can't sleep at night because you're thinking about that one person who said those mean things. It's just not a fun or great way to live. I would much rather show grace, eat a little bit of, whatever eat crow means, and just let it go. I can be sad about it. I told my wife, I'm bummed, and I was kind of bummed the rest of the night. But I was also glad that when he wrote right back and said, thanks, Joe, you're the best. We're still a big fan. And my schedule cleared up. And so I added in some new clients that day. And the next day, 2 more mixing jobs came in, and I added them into the slots that I had scheduled for these clients. So it all works out. Now, does it always work out that clean and neatly? No. But I think it cannot hurt to always try to be the cool guy, to try to be the nice guy, to try to be kind and accommodating. Now, don't be a pushover. Don't let people take advantage of you. And somebody in the chat said it's really cool that they wanted to pay you for the time that you had spent. Absolutely. It would have been a lot more difficult if they had said, yeah, we want a refund for all of the hours that you've put in. Because then, even though they didn't get what they wanted, I did invest real time there, and they were very gracious to allow me to continue to be paid for the time that I invested. So that was pretty cool. But anyway, that's all I wanted to share with you. If you ever find yourself in a place to get fired, come back and listen to this. We've all been there, or if you haven't been there, you will be there. Getting fired is not the worst thing in the world. It's certainly not a reflection of you, and it's just another answer to the question, is this a good fit? Boom. All right, I can't help but feel like I was coming off a little self-righteous in that segment. It's not really the point. I really just wanted to share, honestly, hey, I got fired. It's kind of embarrassing. But it's okay. I am okay. You are okay. We are okay. Okay, let's go into your questions, because this is more about you than me anyway. And mostly going to answer questions in the live stream. So if you can ever make it to these live, if you are listening to the recording or watching the video, I am turning over a new leaf, and I'll try to do a better job of announcing this, but these podcasts have been pretty sporadic. If you've been following, then you know, for the first few weeks of doing these video versions, I had 2 or 3 a week, and then I would drop down to 1, then I'd skip a week, and I've skipped as much as 3 or 4 weeks, I think now. I don't want to do that. I want to be more consistent, because I think that's just good for everybody. So you can be looking for me to do this unless something else comes up schedule-wise, every Tuesday I'll be putting out one of these podcasts. And most likely those are going to happen at 1 p.m. Central Time. Now, I don't expect you to remember that because you've got a busy life, but if you can work it out where you take your lunch break and can tune in and ask a few questions and get a few answers, might be a cool routine for you for your every Tuesday. So, or if you're over there in Europe, it's evening time and you're getting ready for dinner, and you can invite me to dinner, and that'll be great too. Johnny Lipsham, I'm looking at you. I'd like to know what we're having tonight. Johnny's on the call. He's in Scotland. Anyway, you can, if you can't remember that, which I don't expect you to, write this down, or just remember it, go to homestudiocorner.com/calendar. There is a simple little Google Calendar there that has all my events on there, all the Home Studio Corner events, including this podcast. You'll see every Tuesday for the next month it is scheduled, and also the topic has been planned. Look at that. I'm actually being proactive. So next week we're going to talk about setting prices. The following week we're going to talk about room correction and treatment. Is it the ultimate cop-out? And then the final week of the month we're going to talk about going clickless, meaning not using a click. Oh, what? That's going to be fun. You'll also, if you're a VIP member, you'll see the times and dates for any VIP training, and then anything else that might come up for that relates to Home Studio Corner that is some sort of a live thing. I'm trying to do a lot more live streaming because it's fun and it's engaging and it keeps me accountable too. So there you have it. That's how you keep up with these podcasts and live streams and all that fun goodness. Okay, first question comes from Bobby. Bobby Kunkel says, "Hey Joe, what does an average day look like for you, hour by hour, and do you find it difficult to make family time?" That is a good question. I'm going to answer this question as of right now because my routine changes almost as often as my clothes or my haircut. I'm kidding. If you're watching this now, you've noticed I've pretty much shaved my head again because I just have a sneaky suspicion I'm going bald and my wife won't tell me. So the average day for me right now looks like this. So recently I've really been pushing to pick up more client work. There have been times in the past where I've been kind of exclusively doing Home Studio Corner stuff and my own music to the exclusion of working with other musicians and artists and clients, which there's nothing wrong with that per se, but I found myself missing it and also feeling a little bit like a worse version of myself, thinking I'm going to work on Home Studio Corner because that's good work, but working with clients is I don't know, beneath me or something arrogant like that. If I create a video to sell, then I could sell that over and over and over again. But if I commit an afternoon to mixing your song, then that's a one-time thing. I don't get that time back and I can't invest. I don't create something that I can then sell. And that's a legit thing, but I think I went too far in the other direction where I was only trying to create assets and things that could be sold and create value over time and missing out on how much fun it is to make music. Music is not efficient, right? Making music requires time and effort. And, if you're going to be in a band, you have rehearsals and then you play shows and sometimes you don't make money. And there's just so much good about music that on a spreadsheet doesn't make a lot of sense. So I've gone through seasons where I've been Mr. Spreadsheet, and a spreadsheet will always tell you not to work on music or not to work on something you're passionate about or not to work on something that doesn't pay you money right now. And for me, it's not a great place to live. And it just doesn't, I end up being a worse version of myself. So in the spirit of honesty, as is the theme for today, here's what my schedule looks like right now. And this will change, but keep asking me. Ask me in 6 months, it'll be different. It'll be kind of interesting to see how it's changed. So for right now, most of the time, my Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays are studio days. So if you were to contact me about booking a session and we booked one, it would go into my next available Monday, Wednesday, Friday time slot. So right now, that looks like a lot of one-off mixing jobs and some production stuff. There was a tracking session the other day. There was some another recording session. So it's kind of a mix of recording and mixing. And some of that is centered around a project that I'm doing for my VIP members. That's kind of interesting. So if you're not a VIP member, check that out. A lot of cool stuff happening over there. But a lot of it's client stuff. By the way, I've started doing this thing and it's really fun. If you want to hire me to mix your song and you also want me to shoot a video of myself mixing it, so a screencast of me mixing the entire song and kind of walking you through it as if you were sitting here next to me, that's something I'm starting to offer, and it's really fun. So email me, joe@homestudiocorner.com. I can send you a quote if that sounds like something you want to do. It's both educational and you also get a mix out of the deal. It's the same as if you hired me to mix. You still can ask for revisions and I will give you a mix that you want. But you also get the video, and it'll be a full 2-3 hour video where I'm sitting there. Okay, now let's try this. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try this. Ooh, that sounds cool. What if we did this? It's you're getting into my head, very custom, and it's the kind of thing that I know people have charged hundreds and hundreds of dollars for. It's literally, at least at the time of this video, it's an add-on to my now much cheaper mixing rate. Add-on, like I think it's maybe $50, and you do the video thing. So anyway, that may change. So contact me for the current pricing. But I thought that was kind of cool, and it's been really fun. I've done several, and it's been really interesting because to me, it's more fun to mix with someone else there, even if you're just there in theory. My wife left a comment on the Facebook post. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. So anyway, the question is, what does my day look like? So Monday, Wednesday, Fridays are studio days for the most part. And so Monday, usually it's divided up into 2 blocks, a morning and an afternoon. So if you book me, I'll schedule you for the next morning or afternoon slot that's available. And that's what I do. And so if I don't have a session like today's what Tuesday. Yesterday was Monday. I just had some tweaks to do for a client, so I ended up working on some big picture home studio corner stuff that day because I didn't have any client stuff set up. Tomorrow I've got a mix in the morning and one in the afternoon. 2 different people. I think those are both video mixes. Anyway, and so that's kind of what it looks like. And if I don't have a session set up, then I'm maybe going through quotes that I've sent to people for mixing or production and emailing them. I did a little bit of that today. I said, hey, are you still wanting to do, you talked about me producing an album for you. We still want to do that. Things like that. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, pretty open. Now I still make time to hopefully post some things to social media for Home Studio Corner and keep up with my email and all that. I try to get my inbox to 0 every day if I can. I don't do it every day, but I try. And so I can stay on top of things because I'm bad about getting behind on stuff, which I'm sure you can relate to. This episode's going to be a little bit longer, so just stick with me because I talked a lot at the beginning. I want to answer all your questions. So anyway, that's my typical Monday, Wednesday, Friday, just kind of there. Okay, and then Tuesday, Thursdays, the afternoons are Home Studio Corner time. So for example, right now is a Tuesday. I'm doing this podcast. Last Thursday, I did a bunch of YouTube videos for Home Studio Corner. So I want to be consistent with this podcast, but also on Thursdays, I'm going to be putting out a new YouTube video. So be looking for those. I've got some cool ones coming out over the next few weeks. So make sure you're subscribed to the Home Studio Corner YouTube channel. So that being said, that's what, one of those days is usually around content. The others may be around doing more strategic changes to the business, things like that. And then the mornings on Tuesday, Thursdays right now, especially Thursdays, are devoted to church. So you may not know this. For the last year and a couple months, I've been the interim worship director at my church. Our worship guy left, and they asked me to step in and be the interim guy until they hire someone. So that's gone on for a year and a little bit now. And it's been great. It's just typical, involves me going to a meeting at the church or a couple different meetings and setting up the songs and coordinating musicians and bands and all that stuff. So it's fun, but obviously it takes away time during my week, and Tuesday, Thursday mornings are kind of the time I devote to that, in addition to rehearsals on Saturday mornings and actual church on Sunday mornings. So that's a typical view of my week. The evenings are usually free. If I get way behind, I may come down to the studio one night to catch up on a mix I didn't finish or some tweaks I need to do. But for the most part, evenings are hanging out with Pam and the kids. So I get done with start work around 8 or 9, get done around 4:30. And 4:30 I go up and I usually play with the kids while Pam makes dinner. And then we usually do something as a family after dinner. As far as the question was, how do you find time for kids? I mean, I'm blessed and very thankful that a lot of my studio work happens during a normal work day. So I spend time with my wife and kids at night and on the weekends. And I walk Owen just started kindergarten. This week is his first full week. So I walk him to school. It's about a quarter mile down the road. I walk him to school every morning. And then after I do this podcast, in about an hour and a half, I'll go walk down and pick him up. Love it. It's one of my favorite things right now. But it's really fun. You get alone time with your kid. As long as it's not raining, it's awesome. Although it's ridiculously hot. So that's fairly typical. I don't know if that answers your question, but it gives you kind of a broad view of it. So good question. Thanks for checking. Thanks for asking. I hope that's helpful. Now, I will say too, if you've got a day job and you're trying to do studio stuff on the side, your schedule is going to look a lot different. It might look like having to get up at 5 to spend an hour on working on a mix, or staying up late, or setting aside one Saturday a month that the entire day is studio stuff. So you and your wife and your family have an agreement. Daddy's going to be home with the family 3 out of the 4 Saturdays this month, but this one Saturday is my studio day. And you'll be surprised if you commit to something like that, how productive you will be, even if it's just one Saturday a month. You'll get a lot done because you'll be thinking about it all month. You'll be planning for it, arranging for it, scheduling for it, and a lot's going to happen. So something to think about. That's a random side note. Nathan Brown says, are you compressing as you're recording? Yeah, there's a little compression going on the Eureka. What you're hearing on the live stream is also turned up and limited just to be loud enough for the stream. But what's being recorded here into Studio One is just got a tiny bit of compression. When I talk a little louder, the compression needle just moves a little bit. So I'll go in, and I actually don't do a lot of compression on podcasts. I go in and slam it into a limiter to get the volume to a decent level, but compression doesn't do a lot for vocals, I found, spoken word-wise. Good question. Tim says, it looks like the exercise program is working. Turns out exercise doesn't do jack for your weight. You have to not eat as much. Who knew? Crazy, right? It's a slow and steady race for me. David says, when you work on a mix and the tracks sound like they don't belong together, maybe EQ is the obvious answer, but it can be difficult to get them to sit in the mix. It's a great question, David. If tracks, the biggest problem you will face as a musician, as a recording engineer, as a mixing engineer, whatever you want to call yourself, is getting good recordings and good productions. Good arrangements, good combination of tracks. One of the things I've found with these latest client projects that I'm doing is occasionally when I'm really struggling with the mix, it's a lot of times it's because it's not a great arrangement. So you may build this mix where it's feeling really full, but then the way they recorded it, this one guitar part goes away, but nothing takes its place. So your mix goes from sounding full for these 16 bars to feeling empty, and you've got to kind of create something to create that energy. So it's kind of poor planning in the recording phase, or more often than not, it's just a matter of they just haven't done a lot of production and they haven't thought about all these things. So that's why it can be a real challenge. So sometimes EQ is the answer. For me, a lot of times it's a lot of automation, a lot of, okay, when that guitar disappears and there's nothing to take its place, I'm going to automate this guitar to get louder, or bring the bass up, or something, bring in an effect or a distortion that's going to add some energy that allows that to keep moving energy-wise. And sometimes you can only do so much. So I don't know if that answers your question, David, but EQ can be the option. But a lot of times if they don't go together, it's because, you've got a super clean classical nylon string acoustic guitar and then an electric guitar part that sounds like it was recorded by Metallica. Could that go together well? Maybe. Or is it more just they don't go together? It might be the second one. And you just do what you can. David says, could it be an issue of them being recorded at different settings, like 24-44-1 versus 24-48? Well, that shouldn't affect them lining up and things like that. I'm not sure what you're asking, David. Maybe this is an offline question. Email me. I'll help you. Michael Jensen says, I just finished Understanding Compression 2.0, and it's unreal. Amazing how much I was wrong just twisting knobs without a foundation, so thank you. Well, Michael, you are welcome. Michael, I believe you won that in Kern Ramsdale's Home Recording Weekly songwriter contest of some sort. So congratulations, and I'm glad you liked it. You can check out Understanding Compression. This podcast brought to you by understandingcompression.com, which is at a new price, by the way. Just saying. Just go see. You'll like it. Tim E. says, how's the hunt for playing out going? Any returned calls yet? One of the venues, you may remember a few episodes back, I called people to book shows. And it's funny, some people are like, that was the most inspiring thing ever. And then someone else would say, no, that was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. So it's probably somewhere in the middle. But one of the venues emailed me back and essentially said, you don't have a big enough fan base and you look a little too clean cut for us. And so I went back and was like, are you saying it's because I have a hymns album on my website and you think we're clean cut Christians who won't drink? And they're like, well, no, it's just you're kind of clean cut. And I was like, it's because I have a hymns album, isn't it? So I kind of was playful with her. And so we've been talking, and I still don't think we're going to do a show until I've got some more bands to book with it. But I did find an article written by the same people that I was talking to where they suggested another venue that kind of will book anybody. So I've got a show pretty much lined up for the end of this month, the 29th. I've just got to confirm with my drummer. So yeah, first show is happening. It'll be in some dive bar in Nashville. So if you want to know more about it, I'll let you know. But I'd love for you to come. It'll be fun. Yeah. Michael says, I've always thought it was interesting you used large diaphragm condensers in the podcast. I see now you switched to a SM7B. What inspired the change? All right, here's some real advice for you. A friend of mine borrowed my SM7B, and I had to do the podcast, so I had the Roswell Audio Mini K47 sitting nearby, so I set it up. And then my friend didn't give this back for a year, so that's what I used. And it also sounds fantastic, and condensers can work fine for this kind of stuff. So, yeah, there was no real strategy behind that at all. Tiki, my boy Tiki, says, how do you get your high end to be so smooth in your mixes? It's pretty and nice. A lot of it has to do with the recording. A lot of it has to do with not over compressing things, and possibly, I'll tell you a big one. If you've got a harsh mix, guess what environment will be the least forgiving for said harsh mix? These right here. If you're listening to the podcast, I'm holding up a set of Apple earbuds. I think these have gone through the wash because the cables are all squiggly. But these, if your mix is too bright, it will chop your ear off with these. So if you are struggling with mixes that just aren't smooth enough, you need to do more listening on earbuds, more checking your mixes on earbuds and being critical about it. If it sucks on Apple earbuds, then it's not a great mix and probably isn't going to work. So it's not the best advice. You know, it doesn't give you any tactics, but that's one. If you're not sure if yours are harsh, listen on those and you'll be pretty quickly be able to figure that out. It's a great mix checker. I hate it because half the time it points out something that I missed in the big mix, but it's totally worth it. The other thing also, Tiki, is just a lot of the brightness in recordings or in mixes is because things were recorded so brightly. So if you can find ways to record things differently, record the vocal with the mic closer so it gets a little more deep low end than, having it a little bit farther away where it tends to be a little brighter. Maybe it's matching up microphones to sources a little bit better. Maybe it's using more ribbons and dynamic mics or darker sounding preamps and things like that. But yeah, that's my answer to that question. Let me check over to Facebook, see if there are any questions there. Here's a question from Pam Gilder, also known as my wife. She says, right now, how many working notebooks do you use? Okay, see, here's the thing. When you're a nerd, you just gotta be a nerd. And my wife is not really a nerd, and she makes fun of the nerdy things that I do. So one of the nerdy things I do is I get into notebooks. So here's a notebook. It's a Moleskine plain. There's not even lines on the page. It's just a notebook. But I use it to keep track of stuff. Now, I will switch back and forth. Sometimes I'll be on a calendar and using an app like Wunderlist to keep up with all the stuff I've got to do, but sometimes that gets overwhelming, and I switch back to a notebook for a while, and I'll be obsessed about the notebook, and I'll set it up and all that. But I do things like this. I set up a calendar, drawing lines into a notebook, and try to just let my life be run through that notebook as opposed to 10 different places like a calendar and all that stuff. If you look over my shoulder, hang on. Here are some notebooks. I just grabbed 3 black journals, essentially, that I've used in the past. So there's one from April to October of 2015. There's one from November to December of 2015. That was a lot of stuff in just a month. And one from December 2015 to April 2016. So I like them. I like to use them because I like to write with a pen, and I like to check things off of a box when I do them. Like, for example, when I do this podcast and get it posted, I've got a little check box. It feels really good. Now, is it nerdy? Absolutely. Do I also keep a little tiny notebook in my pocket and a pen to write things down? Yes. Is that dumb in a digital age where I have a phone with me at all times where I could write things down? Yeah, it's probably a little dumb. But when I write things on my phone, and I can't get this back in my pocket, when I write things on my phone, something happens. When you can write unlimited things into an app, for example, then guess what? You write unlimited things. If I go pull up, there's an app called Wunderlist that was great. We use it for our shopping list, and I've used it for to-do lists from time to time over the years, off and on. It's fantastic. It's organized well. You can have lists underneath lists. But if I go look at my someday work folder, where stuff I'm thinking about doing at some point, there are folders in here. You can't see it because I'm not showing it, but that have, my soon folder has about 50 things in it, of things I need to do soon. I think of anything and I add it in there and I feel like I'm being productive, but I'm not, because I'm just adding a bunch of noise. I don't even filter it. I don't even think, is this worth adding? I just add it. And it's great to have a place to dump ideas, but when you're just adding stuff, your brain starts to think, I got to do all this stuff. So in the notebook, I can only add so many things because I can only write down things so quickly, and it makes me stop and think. If I'm going to find an open page and write this down, maybe it's not worth doing. And if it's not worth doing, then I can save a lot of time by not doing anything. So anyway, you can all rag on my wife, Pam, here's her email address. See, if she's going to be a smart aleck on my podcast, then she's going to have to suffer the wrath. Send her an email, Pam, P-A-M, at homestudiocorner.com. And you can either be on her side and say that you agree about the notebook thing, or you can be on my side and you can say, hey, leave Joe alone, he's amazing. Either way, it's up to you. But Pam at homestudiocorner.com is her email address. Tiki says, it's time to wrap things up. We've gone way longer than normal, but thanks for sticking around with me. Tiki says, a Casella and Gortmaker and Gilder writing session, a 1-hour song. So Jeremy Casella is a good friend. He's actually one of the guys, Tiki, that we're interviewing to be the music guy at our church, by the way. And then Ben Gortmaker, both of whom have been featured on my podcast, wanted me to do a writing session with the two of them. I've written some weird songs with Ben. I've never written with Jeremy. It would probably be awesome. I don't do a lot of co-writing. It's awkward. All right. Question from Random Man says, how do you know when to stop the mix, tweaking, etc.? When is it time to stop it and turn it over to the mastering engineer? Okay, good final question for the podcast. So, what I do is when I feel like I'm somewhat close, or I'm getting close to doing too much, I will stop and listen without touching anything. Listen to the entire song and take notes. And then maybe listen again on Apple earbuds and take notes. And then those notes that you took are your to-do list. Once that's done, you repeat the process until you have nothing that you find wrong with the mix anymore, and you're ready to move on. It's not as easy as it sounds, but it's worth trying. See ya.